on Rich. I think that's quite a bit of fun. Good having you here with us, Rhonda. We're super excited for Data Sharks today, and to have you here with us. For everybody that didn't see the invites and whatnot, or the announcements, so we're going to have Rhonda Fisher here with us. She is the director of data and analytics at Bell Textron. Now, probably most people know what Bell does, Rhonda, but if you could maybe talk a little bit about what Bell, what kind of company Bell is, I think that would be a good start. And then let's talk data.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Bell, most people know Bell because we are one of the main and primary, certainly helicopter provider in the industry. But there are so many other things that we do. We really define ourselves as the future of vertical lift. There's so many great vertical lift experiences that we are working on, have worked on, successfully delivered. It is just a great time to be part of the aerospace industry, and a great time to be part of Bell. So Bell is really redefining flight with some of the work that we're doing, and as well as the work that they've given me to do in the data and analytics space. So because of that, we are very forward looking, really grabbing at all of the technology possible to just be that technology company redefining flight. So super happy to be a part of Bell and be a part of this.
Yeah, I mean, Bell's amazing. When we were at the beach in November with my kids, we were near Fort Walton in Florida, and one of those Osprey, what is it, a helicopter or a plane? I don't know what it is.
It's a bird.
It flew across, and I was like, guys, look at that. You see that? That is a really cool airplane. So anyway, that it's Bell's a lot of fun as a company. Really cool
a lot of firsts.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
we were part of the moon landing. We were part of Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. Part of the jetpacks. We were part of. I mean, we have been a part of iconic firsts for going on 90 years now. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so it's a huge honor
Air
to have you
taxis
on.
are coming.
Yeah, let's do it. I want to ride in an air taxi. So one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on is to have you talk about one of our favorite topics, which is data architecture. And if you could just like throw out a clean slate, no baggage, you don't have to deal with past stuff, but if you could just what would data architecture look like for you if you were to do that, and when it comes to building this sort of governed pipeline of data, what would your vision be?
Yeah, so if you put a list together of must-haves, must have this, must have that, it's really got to have data by birthright. And I mean that as you have a badge as an employee and you walk in the door, you have access, open access to data, not the closed veiled, hold your cards closed, mother, may I have this piece of data? May I have this piece of data? Because that open access, that kind of, I guess you could even call it open architecture, allows that creativity and that innovation to find real answers and drive the business forward. So I would say that's probably a big must have. It must be some sort of self-healing, means it doesn't have to be a person be in the loop all the time. It's got to be where the system and the data lake itself is kind of smart enough to understand what's being dumped into it and how that's getting replicated, right? It's got to be up to date. It's got to be timely. It's got to be bought into, right? From an adoption and a change management perspective, people have to be able to buy into it so that we don't have other ponding of data, or people going off and trying to make their own solution, right? So it's got to be certifiable almost, that people say, if you're not using the data
Right.
that's in this data lake or this data environment, then we don't want to hear about it, because that's the piece that's what we want. I
I
would
love
also
that.
go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I was gonna say that Mother May I I've never heard it that put that way. I like it though, and I'm curious, what are some of the behaviors that happen when that is the case? Like when it becomes like this sort of isolated, um, in its it, scenario where they can't get access to any data. Like, what happens to the users?
So I actually had somebody yesterday that said, we've heard all these great things about your data environment and we
Hmm.
want in, but I don't understand. And
Yeah.
so I'm a storyteller. I
Uh-huh.
talk in visualizations, because I think
Yep.
that's the best way people understand. And I told them that most people, when they're talking about data and data access, data governance, et cetera, they put up a wall and then they poke a
Hmm.
thousand little pinpricks in it to give you this piece of access and this piece of access. And so you see this black fabric with a
Yep.
thousand little pinpricks in it for you to be able to get the data. And what we're trying to do is build an environment that's this open field of data. And every
Yeah.
once in a while, you've got this low little box over here that's kind of,
Hmm.
you can't see what's in the box, but it
Yeah.
doesn't stop you from running and seeing and have vision and be able to have
Engaging.
access.
Yep.
And that's how I explain the difference. And like I said, picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
The alternative, Jared, is you get data hoarding. You've got people who have spreadsheets and
Yeah, that's
spreadsheets and
true.
spreadsheets,
That's
and
true.
they're the ones, when spreadsheets start to inherit people's names, you've got a data democratization or lack thereof.
Or tribalism. Like you see tribalism happen a lot where people are just like, I'm in my tribe, you're in your tribe, you won't share with me, I won't share with you. We're not going to have any discussion, you know.
Yeah.
So
And
Um,
a lot of
we have,
times that, please.
go ahead, Arcady.
A lot of times that's where the problems begin, because when you have an organizational structure where that was the norm, so that particular individual, that group was known as the supplier of that data.
mhm.
And when you try to create a cohesive enterprise architecture, it becomes difficult because they feel that you're taking things away from them. And so,
Yeah.
getting that prepared and getting people corralled together is a critical success factor.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Rhonda?
Just on the tribalism note, one of the
Mm,
ways that we've been able to try and help and try and deal with that is certainly, talk about the benefits of what they get by being part of this data community.
mhm.
But larger than that, we've given them their own um, sandbox, right? So they've
Yeah,
got their
yeah.
place for their little tribe, and there are things that they can go do with that. But
Yeah, yeah.
anytime you want to share outside of that,
Mhm.
it has to be promoted to the larger enterprise solution. So if you want a
Yeah.
sandbox to work in, we're happy to give you that
Right,
sandbox
right.
to work in. But when you want to start being a supplier of data, you do it in the larger environment through a series of promotions and getting things out there in production. And that has worked really well, because
Mhm.
people felt like we might be trying to keep them in a box. It has to be an all or nothing. And then
Mhm.
that way it gives us kind of a gradient level
Mhm.
of data maturity. They want to try it. They want some advantages of what's going on in the data
Right.
environment, but they don't really know what that looks like yet. And
Yeah.
so we kind of let them try before they buy, and then they
Mhm.
say, yes, we want to go do that. And then it's like, well, you have to get it promoted through the proper cycles. And
Mhm.
that has been working really well.
And I had an interesting conversation with a gentleman about um and he was kind of outside of our space. Like he was outside of the BI space, integration space, all of that. And he's like almost questioning my industry. Like, why do you even have to do this? Like, what's this turn data into information? Data is information. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not that. And when you're talking about an enterprise, it's not just what is information to you. It's what's information to a body of people and being able to curate that information to a body of people in a way that's meaningful. And I think a lot of folks look at analytics as sort of like this fun thing that you can twist widgets and knobs for, but really this is where that sort of you know an organization that needs to take something to the rest of, or a group that needs to take something to the rest of the organization, they need to start thinking much broader than just their little team. There's a lot more governance that goes along
It's
with
not
that.
an endpoint. It's not an endpoint.
Right.
It is truly the stepping stones. And so
Yes.
if you treat data and pieces of data, including logic and other things, as stepping stones to larger answers,
Mhm.
then people start to get the kind of get with the program, understand
Mhm.
that, oh, this isn't the end. Just what I want isn't the end. It's
Yep.
just the first answer. It's not
Yep.
the last answer. And that's been helpful.
So how, because getting people to get there, right, and move into the sort of more governed approach of doing things, there's a lot of pushback that happens along that route. Like whether you're going to get pushback from users in one form or another. Like, what are some of the ways? What are some tactics that people can use to handle that pushback? To push past that moment.
So, we've been really successful in our development and rollout of the data environment to make people part of the solution. And I know it sounds trite, and I know that you say, well, you can use that, in every solution in every industry about everything, but giving them some accountability, giving them a piece of it, they're now a part owner of what's
Mhm.
happening, has really helped us and made a difference because we make them famous because then they're part
I
of
like
the
that.
solution, right? And so giving everybody their 15 minutes of fame has
Mhm.
really been good for us.
Yeah, we've experienced this in Arcadia. Arcadia will recognize the company when I talk about this, but we were at a company. This is years ago, where accounting, I think it was accounting or finance, had built like some very in-depth analytics, and the data warehousing team, and it was information that was so needed by the organization, and it was accounting that had put it together, but the data warehouse team, that the team over here in IT, hadn't put it together. And so they kept pointing to these analytics that had been created as, well, this is wrong, you shouldn't follow this, shouldn't use this. And I remember Arcady in a meeting with them saying, like, the company is using this, like, and it's useful. You know, how, how are you going to get these people to participate in this world if you can't recognize the good that they've done, And I think it was a moment for them. They kind of sat back and were like, yeah, I mean, I guess they spent some time working on it, and
They
it's
spent a
kind
lot
of
of
like,
time working on it.
yeah. So I like that a lot. Make these people heroes. Is there good ways to do that in terms of, do you like put their name on the analytic or something? Is there a good way to do that or or is it just mentioning that, this is this person's work?
We've allowed a lot of meetings. Sorry, I'm about to excuse me.
No worries.
Every time we have to have a big conversation
Mm-hmm.
from executive leadership, either by our business unit or our parent company,
Mm-hmm.
we drag along a success story from the business and they
That's
present.
awesome.
And that
That's
has
awesome.
really helped.
Yeah, that's huge.
I think one of the key things also to touch on is when you start a program, and really information management is unlike any other project that an organization embarks on. When you're doing an ERP deployment, it has a start, it has an end, and you're done, and then you're in maintenance mode. You're doing upgrades, you're doing patches, and those kinds of things. Questions and how do you run a business? How do you manage information? That's a day-to-day operation, and so a lot of times we've described information management and the practices around it as a journey rather than a destination. And so getting that mindset around sort of what does that look like, and the fact that it's not something that you start and finish, because the organization continues to change and morph, and so you may want to look at things in a bit of a different way, or maybe include some new sources. Systems will change. New people will come into the organization and have other questions that they will want to ask. And so, Rhonda, if you could talk a little bit about the roadshows and how those are important in terms of bringing people together virtually now through sessions like this and Zoom, but in physical, when people can do a walkthrough and actually see things.
Yes. So yeah, that has been one of the main tricks in our bag that we use, is just be out there, be ever present, and continually evangelize the benefits of what's happening. And so we do that on varying levels. We'll have technical roadshows that we invite a completely different audience to than we do with business roadshows, than we do with even benefits roadshows, or even if we've got to maybe get a couple of extra stakeholders, right? That's a little bit of a different message. And so having multiple messages and adaptations of the vision, and being out there and being ever ready and keeping the conversation fresh all the time has really helped us continually drive adoption.
Yeah, let's talk about that for just a second on the adoption side. Like, we get this question a lot from folks, which is, okay, I'm building this solution. There's a lot of effort being put in place to do this. And the only reason this question comes up is because there are other organizations that fail at this badly, which is user adoption. Like, you finish the solution and now you need to, or not finish the solution, but you're starting that solution and you need to start corralling people in to start using it. So what are some good ideas in terms of, and I think we've heard some, but I want to flesh that out a little bit more. Like, are there any other things that are really key to driving the actual, people getting on their keyboards, logging in and engaging there?
So I'm a mathematician by heart. I'm a nerd, and I'm not even a closet nerd. I'm a nerd. And I love it. But I think by being able to talk to people, and that adoption is just out there, that just being excited about it and talking about, oh, and it can do this for you, and it can do this for you, and have you seen this? It's like people getting a new car and they want to, drag you over. Look what it does here, and look at this gadget. And so I think that by making them part of the conversation, number one, and getting them excited, right, and getting them infected, right, with this passion, helps them. They are now an evangelist for the same piece. And if this was a brick and mortar, right, kind of thing, you'd be selling bricks with people's names on it, right? But that's what this is they've got a piece, as we build this house, everybody's got a brick. Everybody's got, this is my side, this is my room, this is my this.
I love that. I mean, I love the fact that there's other people with their names to the solution, and it's such a huge piece of and believe it or not, Ron, we try to talk about this in other organizations. Like, you really have to have an evangelist to push that agenda constantly. Like, this is not my solution. This is so-and-so's solution, and so-and-so, and it has to be a coach that's there consistently. So yeah, it's a huge deal.
So it's Jared, it's about culture. It's about lots of things that sort of go into it. And I think one of the challenges, and we've talked about this a lot, we work typically in very mature organizations. But I love the idea of, if we were a startup, what would we do differently? How would we behave differently? What things would we do that
Clean
we as a
slate.
mature company today are maybe hindered from doing.
Mhm.
And data, again, it's one of the unique things that unites the organization. When Rhonda hosted the roadshow, one of the big things that happened is that people who had preconceived notions about what it is that we're doing could ask questions in a you're not sitting in around a room in a boardroom where you're uncomfortable asking the questions. Here you could talk about data governance, and you could talk about data modeling, and you could talk about project onboarding. And so those things became really, really important. And then the other side of it is when those folks get excited, exactly as Rhonda said, it is contagious,
Right.
because they will spread the message even further. We want this sort of contagion to go on, not the world that we're living in today in terms of contagion.
Not that one. Not that
this is a
one.
much better contagion.
This is the
I'm
good
done
one.
with that one. Yeah.
Yes.
So another question that I had for you, Rhonda, is and this is you know, it's an age-old question here, but how do you govern the data while allowing the autonomy, right? Because there's a certain amount of control you got to have on this data, but you want to allow for some of that autonomy. You know, how do you facilitate that?
So I think in the early days, the team, and the team is a big part of our success. The kinds of people and the culture and the way that we went about solving problems was very key to the success of this. But early on, we separated compliance from governance, because so
Interesting.
many people want to smash it together and make it the same thing. And
Mhm.
if you do that, the water's got to seek its lowest level, and it will always
Sure.
get to a compliance standpoint, and then you're back in a control structure again. And that
Mm.
was not what we wanted. We wanted an enabling structure, right? And a
Yeah.
freeing structure, which means we couldn't base it on compliance. So we used the technology to build in some of that compliance so that people don't even see it and don't have to worry about it. And then what we get to do is the people part, which is
Mhm.
the governance part. It's
I
like,
love it.
how do we want to use this data? How many people, right, should have access to this data? What are the
Mhm.
ways that we can free this data up and make it available to everyone?
Mhm.
And let's just hide under the box that's out there in that open field,
Mhm.
just the 3 or 4 fields that are important to keep proprietary. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so by separating those 2 things, it's been a much better conversation for people to come on board and to have more adoption for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, in fact, just even stating it that way, separate the compliance from from the actual conversation, so that you're really focused on enabling it. Find ways that you can have the compliance be its own entity, or its own concept programmatically even. I love that.
Jared, the other thing that I think was brilliant is that when you're in a highly regulated industry, and Bell certainly has, data that has to be protected and secured, the things that will worry people, and you start there. You start security conversation before you have any infrastructure in place. You start planning for these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the pride of the project certainly is, the awards that the team received for getting security built in the way that it was built. It's elegant, it's simple, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it provides for a highly regulated industry, or data that needs to be protected. If you, Jared, are in Austin, you could see the data, but if you travel to the Canadian office, you can't see the data. So there's some rules in place. And so planning for that up front becomes critically important, so that you handle the objections before they come.
Mhm. So one question I have about your, because it sounds like you're constantly sort of corralling new parties into the fold of a governed data environment. You know, and as you corral new parties, you're going to have new discoveries that everybody can kind of work with. And so what I'm wondering is, like, and Arcadia and I have had these discussions, is like, especially like with in some of our projects where we have data science teams and we're trying to corral the data science discoveries back into the warehouse or back into something that larger parties can use. What are some strategies you've used to sort of get new data or get new discoveries sort of back into the ecosystem so that people are larger audiences are using it?
No, that's a great question. And so obviously if we could do it any way we wanted to do it in money or time, right?
Yeah.
Or endorsement was all on our side.
Mm-hmm.
We would want everything built out. We would want all the data landed. We would want all the dimensions, kind of accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
We would want a good representation of all the fact tables and everything as curated as possible, living in this beautiful multi-search catalog.
Yeah.
When the truth of the matter is, people aren't that patient.
Yeah.
And companies aren't that giving, right, for millions and millions and millions of dollars
Yep.
to go
Yep.
make that happen. And we don't have 5 years and 35 people and $20 million to go make that work, right?
Yeah.
So what we had to kind of do was shift a little bit from the if you build it, they will come
Yep.
philosophy to the as we build it, won't you come
Yeah.
philosophy, which has worked really well because it also plays into some of the things we've already talked about, right? They get their own brick, they get to kind of put their name on the wall.
Yeah.
It's part of it, that we had, it's like a painting party for a house, right? Is everybody gets to work and be a part. But as we were building all of that, it really kind of allows us to kind of take a look and see, and just make sure that everybody's involved. I'm not sure I answered your question.
No,
100%.
you did. I mean, I think that as the fact that these people, especially with especially in the case of like limited budgets, when you've got these, you don't have unlimited amounts of money. When you've got to deal with that, being able to take the business unit that is going to be the benefactor of it and have them sort of shoulder some of the effort involved in putting it together, and they get their name on that brick, I think it spreads that out enough that you don't have to have the $23 million budget, amongst all those
Well,
people.
and the best successes are those ones that converge, right? The ones that are built with that collaboration, and that's the deepest level of investment that you're going to get. So to go run off and be on an island, right, for a year and go do something and come back, the whole world may have changed by then.
You're right.
And so it's got to be in tandem with business events and with things that are happening and new product growths that are going on. And if you make yourself part of that answer every time, even just little parts, that's how you get that deep investment and that longevity and sustainability for the future in what's happening.
Perfect. Yeah. So here's a question that that we've milled around a lot inside of Intricity, especially as we're walking into new companies all the time. And we see tribalism a lot, right? Because we're walking into new companies all the time, and we're often being put in the place of having to build out the sausage factory for turning data into information, right? And so, but the tribalism is a challenge because we're asking people to do something they don't do, or they don't do today. They have their own system of doing it, and it can be, people like building their personal spreadsheet a lot, and it becomes like their baby. What are some of the things that you've seen be successful in terms of getting people to give up the tribalism, and become part of the larger community?
Well, the truth of the matter is they do it that way because there hasn't been a solution before. They've solved it themselves because we haven't been giving them a solution.
Yeah.
So if you approach it from a how do I close the gap rather than a you're not allowed to do this, you get a lot more buy-in and them understanding, because it's that whole, 80/20. Do they really want to go out and claw and try to find all of that data every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
right? And then quickly throw together some sort of a visualization and turn it in because their boss needs it by 5 o'clock? Or do they want us to provide them a way for them to choose the data that suits them best, so that then they can spend time, right, doing that further curation, and maybe answering the next question instead of the baseline question. And I think that in presenting to them, look, you're struggling trying to get one question answered.
Right.
If you work this, you can get ahead of your boss. You can already have the answers to questions 2, 3, and 4 before they ever ask it.
Right.
If you look at it this way, but if you continue to solve things linearly, then that's the way that you're going to get rewarded. You're going to get 1x reward.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
solve things like this, you get more of a non-linear kind of a return. And
Yeah.
I think that has gone a long way in being able to help people understand and help people on board and said, okay, then I want to contribute the data that I have or the spreadsheet that I have. And I'm telling you, it never hurts to not make people famous, because making people famous is a good way to have them.
I agree. I agree 100%. I think that changes the equation a lot more than people think. Especially if they see you doing it for other people.
Mhm.
Because then they realize that it truly is. It's not a political game. You're not playing company politics in some form or fashion, because that happens too. You get someone, someone, so they're doing it for a specific reason. But if you're really truly doing it because it's part of the program, and there's sincerity behind it, it wins. It wins every time if people know that there's sincerity behind it.
Well, and I joke about the famous piece, but I really mean it. It's authentic. It's people should get credit for the good work that they do, and we've been about that. We're just this platform, this voice beat, this stage for them to get credit for what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Credit for asking the smart questions and solving the important problems. You see, I think one of the challenges is that many times so if you walk into an organization today, large or small, you take certain things for granted. The fact that you have Wi-Fi in the building, you take for granted. The fact that you have lighting, you take for granted.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are things that we've all come to expect as normal.
Yeah.
Why should that not apply for data? Why should data not be as available as a light, as a network connection, as a Wi-Fi signal? And ultimately, the challenge is that because data is locked into discrete applications, best of breed applications, whether they be ERP or IoT or anything in between, you don't have the ability to enable that innovation, those things. And so you end up spending a lot of the time massaging the data, preparing the data. The flip side of that is, in building a net new information management platform, you do have to get plumbing in place. You do have to get infrastructure in place. You do have to get storage in place. All of those things have to be in place. And now there's a huge opportunity to leverage that. We've built, they're Lego blocks that are already in place. And so the manufacturing of those fact tables becomes so much easier because all the dimension tables are already in place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the questions I have, Ron, is what are some of the mistakes that people often make when they're approaching the data governance and analytics practice? What are some of the ways that people can really botch it?
Well, I think we talked about one already, which is not bringing people along for the journey, trying to make it compliance driven, and not about that governance and enablement driven, and people clearly understanding the difference, which I do still think is a challenge out there in industry today, is understanding that approaching something from rules and policy and access is very different than talking about how we collaborate on data and how we use and share and get insights on data. Those are very different things. They are interdependent and they both have to coexist, and we can't be successful without both of them. But if you put the spotlight on compliance, you're not going to get those kind of nonlinear returns. If you would put the spotlight, you do your homework and get it right and get the compliance in there, but don't focus your end users, your business folk on the compliance piece. Focus on the governance piece. I think a big mistake too is, as you're looking, you don't stifle the innovation and stifle the creativity with, we have this path, it's very well paved, it goes from A and it makes a stop at B and it gets to C and then it goes on down the road, and so you need about 4 hours and you'll get to B, and then in 2 hours later you'll get to C. That's just, you've stifled all the creativity and the innovation, and you're never going to leapfrog the business forward from an innovation standpoint. You've got to give them the tools and free them up and trust. And this is what's been so great about Bell. One of our core values is to think and act differently, right? And to find a better way. And we say that, and it's plastered everywhere, and it means something in the data and analytics space, because it means I'm not going to give you that black wall with 1,000 little pinpricks in it, because then I've got 1,000 pieces of this on the other side that I need to go figure out what to do. I'm going to give you that open field so that you can chart it and you can plan it and you can find it. And then the governance comes in, because now they've run, and they've got a bunch of creativity, and they've done a bunch of innovation, and they've got a bunch of ideas and a bunch of possible use cases and extra data and maybe even 2 extra dimension tables and all of that. Well, guess what? Now we can put that through our process and start talking about people and how that gets fully matured and part of the system for everybody to take advantage of. But if you say everybody's got to take advantage of it, so it's got to follow these rules and it's got to do these things, it's never going to happen. You're going to stifle every bit of innovation and creativity you have. And I do think that's a big mistake a lot of people make.
Yeah. It's almost like you almost need like these pockets, sort of these pockets of innovation that allow the autonomy, right? So you got these pockets, and then comes the avenue. You gotta build the avenue for them to be able to share their, whatever it is, the discovery or it's an analytics, share it with the rest of the organization. And it's that part where the rest of the organization gets involved that, you have to sort of weave that tapestry together into conformity, so that everybody can leverage the information. One of the things Arcadia and I talk about a lot is like, what's the right level of centralization? Is it just what we described? Is it just a cultural function? What would you say? Like, what are some of the ways that we can determine the right level of centralization is?
So I think you've got to have a good start. So we have what we call a hub and spoke model. At Bell, the hub, my department's the hub. It is internal to the IT department at this juncture. And lots of spokes out there from a data science perspective and even a more complex analytics or BI perspective, right?
Sure.
Lots of spokes that are out there. But if you have no hub, then everybody's just kind of operates at random, and you get no benefit, you get no reuse, you get no scalability. But if you operate too centralized and don't allow for some of the hubs, or put so many rules and policies in place that they can't do their work and explore, then people are going to drop off and go rogue and do it their own way. And then you've got tribalism again, because if you're not going to allow them the freedom to try and solve the problem, they will go and solve the problem. They're just going to go do it without you. So you have to kind of take that pride of authorship and do away with it. It's a lot like parenting, right? I mean, you do your kids say, I learned to walk. Your kids say, Mom taught me to walk. No, that's not what happened. But you were there the whole time, right?
Yeah.
and then it happened, and then it's done, right? And all the credit is on the result, and all the credit goes forward, and that's the way it works. And so as long as you're taking that kind of an approach to centralization, right, you'll be successful. But if it's I'm going to stop something from happening, right, is the wrong way to look at it. It's how do I go make this happen and happen safely, right?
Yeah.
How can my toddler go walk safely and doesn't get hurt, as opposed to it's never going to walk because she may fall.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not the way to look at it.
Jared and I have often talked about Bell and the work that you've done in sort of building out the team, building out the platform, and then giving that ability to have the rest of the organization leverage it. One of the challenges is there are many who are doing supporting data initiatives, but doing it in ways that are different than the way Bell has done it. We look at the work that was done at Bell and say, this is a reference. This is a reference of how good things should be built. We have in the movie business, there's the Academy Awards. In the music business, there's multiple awards that are given out. And it's easy to have, you see a director who gets the Academy Award for directing a picture, and all of a sudden that director becomes the most sought after person that you want all the movies to be made by. And so the challenge a lot of times is, how does someone watching this video know what good is and how to replicate good? Because I think people want to start with templates. They want to start with something that's a good reference. That is an example of how do you do that? How do you promote that within Bell? And Bell is a smaller piece of a larger organization who also probably wants the same things to be built, but they want to learn from your lessons and from the things that you've done. How do you promote that? How do you make that happen?
So a lot of it is I'm a talker and I'm a sharer. So I was kind of tailor made for this role because I do want to share and I do want to give it away, right? It's not a control mechanism for me. It's how can we help you so you don't have to make the same mistakes, right? It's a very pay it forward kind of mentality. And by understanding that everybody's got their own set of individual problems. So we had a great template to start with, raw data in a data lake, replicated through beautiful pipelines that were managed, and all the way to a fully curated enterprise data warehouse. And that worked, and it's good, and it's still working. It's very successful. We've added in a couple of extra offerings because we have some unique issues, which I think others will have too. And I guess that's the kind of the message I would say is there is a standard kind of 5-step program to get the basics out there, but don't be afraid to customize and know where your organization needs the most help the fastest and be able to do that. And one of ours was a logic library, right? We added, so we're talking about structured data in a data lake. But what we added is we added queries and logic in an area to the data lake because we had to be able to extract some of, well, all of the logic that are in legacy visualization programs that were in other older kind of applications that have now been replaced, right, with newer technology. We had old archive data that needed, but all of those transformations that went along with it did not meet with our new vision. And so what we had to go do was then kind of separate it and talk about the transformations as well as the data. And wouldn't it be great if those lived together? Because then we've got the one source of the truth until we can drag it all the way up the maturity curve to get to that fully curated enterprise data warehouse. We can't stop building and wait. So how do we do that now? And by doing that now is for us to assume control of some of that logic and put it in our managed environment and let it grow with the data. And then we get to the end to dimensions and facts and that. And so by bringing it on, right? Bring me, you're tired, you're poor, you're bringing it on
Liberty cometh. Yep.
without it having to be clean or a certain state or a certain
Yeah.
level of maturity. Say, it's okay. We don't care what it looks like. We'll help you. It's now got a couple of different buckets to be able to come in and learn and grow. You get all the benefits of a managed environment and know where things are, and can then claim that one source of the truth, because then you've got the mechanics of the transformation, right? The
Yep.
algorithms, the mathematics.
Mhm.
And be able to get to the end. I mean, to the end, from a maturity perspective, I still want it all
Yeah.
that way, right? To the right of the maturity curve. But I had to have a gradient maturity added to my template. So I think the answer is, don't be afraid to customize a little bit to get more people on board, to get more successes, to be able to get more people onto the platform and in and invested in the platform to help you move ahead.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's really important is, that we are on Data Shark, so you are a data shark. And one of the things that happens as a result of that is there are other companies, obviously there are other peers within Bell and sister companies within Bell that need to know that they can come to you, and I'm sure they do already, that they can come to you and you can provide the wisdom and the guidance so that they don't have to, as we teach our kids, learn from somebody else's mistakes. And so it's nice that you've laid the path and prepared it, but it's also true for other companies, because many of our customers and many of the folks that we meet along this journey come to us and say, well, how have others done it? How do I not make the same mistakes that somebody else has made? And so I think that's the other important thing about this Data Sharks venue is the fact that people need to understand, to be here, you have to be a real data shark. So certainly that's important.
I have the scars to prove it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one thing that I've been thinking about as we've been talking is, why is it that there are failures in terms of, like, for example, there are many companies, Rhonda, that go through this journey, and it is just pain all the way through, and it's arguing and tribalism, and and I part of me wonders whether the IT teams seem to be so systematized, so, like, it has to look like this, that the business just sees them as too rigid, and they cannot work with that. And it's just, this is just free flow thinking at this point. Like, I'm wondering if that is the reason why so many fail at this. Anyway.
And I think it's a difference of pushing a solution on or at people, as opposed to locking arms and attacking the solution together, right? I think it's an investment thing. And so I do think there are failures when you say, this is what we've decided and this is how you're going to behave. Well, you never get compliant. That never works. Doesn't even work with your kids. So that never works. So I think it's much more about, we think this is a great solution. We think there are some real benefits for you. We'd like to share it with you and see what you think, and like to see how you'd like to participate and grow with us, and how much of this you want to make and be your own. And we've had lots of success that way.
And showing genuine interest in the stuff they've built, like,
well,
so that,
and that's the thing also, is you got to understand there's a lot of different ways to use data, and different groups inside your organization need to be able to use that data a different way. And we've talked about a number of these things. If we got data science, right? They probably don't even want to go after the star schema, the fully matured model, right? They need data, the way they need data, and being able to have a a fully matured solution where we've got data available in so many different ways and different formats and at different maturity levels, so that, and we encourage, from a cultural perspective, like Arcady talks about, we encourage the use of that data, and then sharing what we build. We talked about this with Ben Stansel, right? Sharing what we built so that other people can stand on the shoulders of giants and then build more. You know, it's very, very important. And it's the interesting thing is, and we see this all the time, it's a technology problem, it's a cultural problem, it's a personality problem, it's a communication problem. It's all of these things put together that you know, Rhonda's got it figured out. Other people, you know, we got to help them figure this out so that they can have, you know, find the joy, right? And in these solutions.
And the reason I bring it up,
that's really the, sorry, Joe.
Go ahead. Well, I brought it up because of Kent Graziano's conversation, when we had that conversation with him about data mesh. And Rhonda, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but data mesh is kind of the concept where you sort of give the responsibility of all of it to you sort of disperse all of the responsibility out, and the main rule being that the people that, you know, generate the data at departmental levels or whatever level it's at, those people have to treat their the development of their data as a product. And that's their term, the data as a product concept, where everything that comes out has to come out as a product to the rest of the organization. So, and I love the concept of it, but with Kent, and when we were talking, the thing that kept sort of itching in the back of my head is that like, not every organization has people that are just so willing to play ball like that. You know, and they see data as an extra job that they're doing.
Well,
and
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, no, I want to hear your feedback on
You've
that.
given me a lot to chew on there. Yes, I think that it can work, especially in highly decentralized organizations. That's really the only way that something like this would be successful. We're very blessed because we've got great collaboration amongst the different functions, and IT is very integrated in all of the functions. So we have a very good relationship, right, amongst all of the departments. But we've set up the right kind of bumper rails, right? And so you can't fall off in the ditch. We put enough goodness and laid enough good road in place that there's lots of ways to succeed and really only one way to fail. And so by doing that, by giving them the adaptability to go out there and pick data, as Rich said, right, and use it without bias, right, from functions, and the ability to, even some of our best data modelers are the actual data scientists themselves without even knowing it. And so what we do is we take their notes after they're done with something,
right.
and look through it, and the way that they've put the things together, then we then go add in our enterprise, you know, data model, the way that that's worked, and we've been able to make our dimensions much more robust because of some of the needs and the necessity that was generated out of what they were doing with a use case. So because we don't have the luxury of having 5 data modelers on staff, we've been able to leverage that work on the back end as a byproduct of some of the use cases of the data scientist, and it's been phenomenal.
And I bet they totally geek out when they see it, right? Like when they see it actually in the model, it's like, oh my gosh, yes.
Well, and you know what? I can't say it enough. And there's another one of, I did that. That one's mine, right? I got the help with
Good
that.
point. Good point.
And so it has been a really good journey. So I would say put those things in place, give as much freedom, and you know, don't put any governors on how fast they can run and what they can do, and then help them get that curated, get that turned into a dimension table, get that productionized. If it wants to stay in your same little department sandbox, that's fine. But if somebody, you know, that's working on it in finance, and then somebody outside of finance wants to use that, we'll help you get that promoted, put into the ODS or EDW proper, and give everybody, you know, the enablement to go use it. and we'll help you with that. And being able to kind of play both sides of that coin, I think has been phenomenally successful for us.
Yeah, that gives me I think that's a good product idea, by the way, Rhonda. I think these data modeling companies, they need to have like, I don't know, like name tags or something for ideas that were offered in the model,
Yeah.
just so that people could claim a portion. You know what? It got me also thinking
Yes.
about, yeah, name tags. It got me thinking a little bit about a quote from, well, it wasn't a quote. It's really more a policy at SpaceX. They have this policy where every design decision, how do they say this? Every design decision uh, is labeled with the person that came up with the idea, and every layer that came up from that idea, gets sort of people's names tagged to it. Now that can sound intimidating in a case of launching rockets, because if something goes wrong, you go down the list. But at the same time, it's actually a brilliant idea, because it also allows you to treat the body of knowledge to go through an access point, like be able to identify, what's the basis of this decision, and how do I flush out the business reason behind it.
Jared, if you look at any source control system like GitHub,
Yeah.
for example, you're contributing your code, and actually that code gets merged and gets promoted, but your name is there with every single
right.
contribution that you
And
make.
that is one of the metadata tags that we have in the
awesome.
catalog that we're working through, is to make sure that we give credit where credit's due.
I think the feed has paused.
I don't know that I'll call it. I think that would, be a neat thing. So
Yeah. Well, Rhonda, it has been awesome to have you on with us. Super excited that we were able to fit into your schedule, and looking forward to hearing about more great adventures at Bell. So we hope at a future point we can have you back on.
when you guys want to talk data science and
Let's do
building
that.
an adaptive, innovative team, you call me back, because I've got
We
lots
will.
of great stories about that.
All right, we will schedule it.
Good stuff.
Awesome, Rhonda. Thank you so
Excellent.
much. Have a good weekend,
Have an
and we'll
excellent
catch you all
day.
later.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.